Just briefly, I would add, we've looked at the issue of incarceration as part of the life course framework. And two things come out is really important. One is, stating the obvious, juvenile incarceration is really a bad outcome. And getting involved in the justice system at an early age, as Shane kind of highlighted with her brother's story, has a detrimental long-term effect on these young men. But that's not the only effect that these young men and boys are feeling. The incarceration of parents also has profound impacts, negative effects on both young girls and boys. But what the evidence suggests is that the impact on boys is even more intense and a little bit different. So I think that you are right that thinking about criminal justice, thinking about the role of law enforcement is really important. And I know in San Francisco, criminal justice is one of the pillars of the MBK work.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing. There is a growing conversation within the philanthropic community around community policing and advocating for city leadership to take on and embrace the findings from the President's Policing Task Force, and particularly around trauma-informed approaches to reducing violence in communities. And I think you'll hear a little bit more about that from our leaders in Stockton today. But I think that is one that's one body of work that while it is critical to the success and change life outcomes of boys and men of color, we haven't seen the city leaders necessarily take on and incorporate into their My Brother's Keepers action plans.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm hoping that at some point we can have a conversation about the practices of gang injunctions and whether or not there is even a place within this framework of discussion, to continue to move in that direction, right? And on one end, we have communities who are quick to react and the tough on crime, and we've got to do something yesterday to address the problem. And so the optics of gang injunctions and police operations look well and certainly work for campaign optical purposes, right? But at the end of the day, are we actually seeing the true effects and impacts and outcomes, right, that they're intended to have, supposedly, and what are the alternatives instead? And so I'd like to, dig into that conversation because I think in my own backyard, right, that is a discussion, debate that's happening as we speak, and people are concerned both from a safety standpoint, but also in terms of what are the unintended consequences of deploying, hundreds of law enforcement agents and picking a bunch of people up and kicking doors down, and ultimately what ends up happening, right? Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for attempting to address that.
Thank you to this panel. I want to just make a comment, and then we'll bring our next panel in. And I want to say this about the importance of the work that's being done locally. When a local jurisdiction, a school district, or a city or a county can implement a new policy and document its success, whether that be addressing willful defiance or eliminating it, as was done in LA, as Oakland has done, and then documenting the outcomes, whether it be increased attendance, lower expulsions and suspensions, higher levels of achievement on different metrics for our boys and men of color and others, and then can bring that to this committee. That's when we can really make a difference, because we can help scale it and then bring it statewide, and we can say this isn't an experiment. This is a proven method that has success and impacts the communities in the way that we all want and transforms the lives of those who we're seeking to help. So I want to thank you for that work and let you know that it's noted and it's critical. And when we seek to do something significant, as you talked about with the speaker on willful defiance statewide, it'll be because you implemented it locally and successfully, and Oakland did, and others did. Same for restorative justice or anything else that we care about. So it can start locally and then grow statewide from there. So I just want to appreciate that local work and tell you how important it is. And with that, I want to say thank you for your participation in our panel today. Appreciate your input. And we're going to go a little bit out of order here and go to our Oakland panel. All panels will certainly have their opportunity. We're going to go to Oakland. Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf is on the panel, as well as President and CEO of the East Bay Community Foundation, James Head. Welcome, and good to see you both.
This is a very distinguished body because it has 2 Oakland Assembly members on
it. We have an honorary Oaklander over here, too.
He visits
from
us
Coachella.
often. He's our partner.
From Coachella, but a little different than Oakland. But.
At your pleasure.
You want me to start? Sure. Well, again, James Head. I'm the president and CEO of the East Bay Community Foundation. Chairman Bonta, I want to thank you again for the opportunity. What I would like to start with is, obviously, you've heard from both Shane and Fred about the commitment of the philanthropic community to this effort. I think that Mayor Schaaf and I's presence here, I think, is the embodiment of that commitment and what we think is important and needed in order to be successful in this work. I think the philanthropic community includes a commitment from not only foundations and donors that we work with, but also from the corporate community. I think in Oakland we have a strong commitment by a number of corporations, Kaiser being an example of one, Clorox, who are devoted to these young people and who I think understand very clearly this issue that we're talking about in terms of the unique issues that boys and young men face. I wanted to just give a little bit of perspective, and the mayor's going to talk, I think, more specifically about what's happening with the Oakland plan. But as you probably know and realize, especially those of you who are in Oakland, this is not new work for Oakland. I think in some ways this idea of a focus on young people, and particularly boys and young men of color, emanates to some extent out of the work of the Black Panther Party some now 50 plus years ago, and their concern for the community and for some of the unique issues that those communities were facing. And in Oakland, we've had a number of organizations who have been at the front and center of this work, that the philanthropic community that the city of Oakland has supported. The Urban Strategies Council, which the two of you are familiar with, but is a data-oriented institution that has led an effort to convene both community organizations as well as county and city government organizations around this issue of boys and young men of color. And that work's been going on for a number of years now. The Unity Council, which is a nationally known, if not internationally known, Latino-based organization in the Fruitvale of Oakland, has been a long-time proponent of programs related to both Latino men and also women who have been involved in gangs and have been caught in the criminal justice system. And they have provided, I think, significant support to those young people in a number of different programs that are very culturally based that they've utilized for this work. And then at the East Bay Community Foundation, a number of African American, what we call elders, and I call them elders, but some of them are probably younger than I am. But they came together to really ask the question, what should we be doing for African American young men and women, and especially young men in Oakland? And their answer to that was a call to action, in which they've now created actually a donor advice fund at the East Bay Community Foundation that is devoted to supporting and identifying other African Americans who would want to support these issues. And then lastly, the Asian Pacific Islanders Youth Promotion Advocacy, or APAL, that you know about, has also been actively involved in this issue. And to Assemblymember Thurman's question, we in Oakland, because of the diversity that is in our city and Oakland is diversity that we are very proud of. Understand that this issue is one that does encompass a range of cultures and a range of young men, and we're devoted to those young men, including Native Americans, and that's very evident in the work that we do. Although we also still get that question in terms of who the target is. In many instances, it's actually who they're talking to. When I talk to many people, because I'm an African American man, they think that is the focus of it, coming from my perspective. But I understand that even though cultures are different, the issues that we have identified and what the data has suggested to us is that there is a lot of similarity to what these young men are experiencing. I do want to make one point about the Asian and Pacific Islander community, which I hope that you all can help to address. Part of the issue for them is that there is not, at least at the state level, a level of data that really actually breaks out the different populations that are included within the Asian Pacific Islander categories. And that prohibits them actually from, I think, doing the work necessary to really understand the range of issues across the cultures that they have. And so they've asked us in philanthropy, and I would ask you to join us in actually trying to really push very hard to ensure that the state, if not the nation, begins to really break out that data and break out the categories so that we really do understand and know what their needs are. Having said that, in terms of what we're doing in Oakland, obviously we still have a long way to go. I think you're very familiar with the fact that still, in terms of though we've reduced the number of murders, for example, that happen in Oakland, the significant number of those who are killed by homicides in our city still continues to be young men, and it still continue to be young men of color. And so we have a significant ways to go. Our graduation rates in the city still suffer from the standpoint that young men of color tend to be those who are least likely to graduate and least likely to go to college. And that is, again, a place that we have to begin to make some difference. And then lastly, in terms of early childhood, those who are ready to read and to do math by third grade, our young men of color still continue to lag far behind those of their counterparts in terms of white young children, and also in terms of actually our women of color. And so I take that to mean that we still have a significant amount of work to do. The mayor's going to talk about our plan, but I thought that I would share with you as I finish what is the ultimate goal that we have, or what are the ultimate incomes and outcomes that I think we are trying to achieve. And our plan actually includes a number of these, and I just want to give you a couple. One of them is that all boys of color reading at the grade level by age 8. And this is the age actually in which reading to learn becomes essential for our young people. Another would be that all boys of color graduating from high school will have the skills and the tools needed to advance to post-secondary educational training. The data would suggest to us that if you get a college degree, that your likely potential for earning increases over your lifetime by close to, if not $1 million. Data also suggests that if you get a graduate degree after getting a college degree, that a graduate degree will also increase your earning potential by an additional $800 to $1 million within your lifetime. So if we can get our young men to this place, we will actually begin to add a number of new millionaires to this figure of, I think, about 9.6 or 9.7 in the country, and that will be a good thing for us. Fred Blackwell mentioned the North Star of the economic North Star that we in the California Executive Alliance are trying to achieve. And that is, in many ways, trying to make sure that these young men have employment, and that is jobs that allow them to support themselves and their families, and that it represents somewhere in the neighborhood of 300% of what is the minimum earning wage that we all know now. So it is a significant increase over what is, at the minimum wage level. And even as we increase the minimum wage, it is significantly over that. And both of those are tied, again, to educational achievement and to advanced achievement. And then lastly, I know Assemblyman Garcia mentioned policing and the criminal justice system. I think that we have a larger goal that we have for this, and that is a criminal justice system that emphasizes fairness, second chance, and rehabilitation and support. And in some ways, this is represented, I think, by policy decisions to shift dollars that we are now using to incarcerate young people. And there was a report done in L.A. and a number of cities last year that indicated that in Los Angeles County, it cost us $230,000 a year to incarcerate a young person. If we were to take that $230,000 and use it to support that young person, as well as from the standpoint of education and to help them stabilize their families, that's a much, much better use, I think, of those resources. So I applaud the fact that you also have a bill that you are putting forth that would provide, at least for the state, a significant amount of state resources, because in philanthropy what we have determined is that to really move this needle, it is really a shifting of public dollars and a concentration of public dollars that will really sort of make these things come true.
Thank you. Again, my name is Libby Schaff. I'm very proud to be the mayor of my hometown, Oakland, California. I'm very proud to have such great assembly members representing me. We were told that you wanted to hear a little bit about our process of accepting the president's challenge for My Brother's Keeper. I have been mayor for just a little over a year, and so I don't think I even had business cards printed when I signed on to accept the challenge and started the process, the four-step process that the president has laid out in the mayor's handbook or playbook for how to kind of take that challenge. And I do want to recognize Assemblymember Bonta actually arranged for us to hold our MBK Summit in the California State office buildings. And it was a sold-out not that we charged to attend, but we literally were over capacity with the number of stakeholders and passionate members of our community that wanted to participate in creating this plan. I know that Fred Blackwell talked a little bit about the life-work framework. That is why Oakland is not just picking one or two of the 6 milestones. We are going hard on all 6 because we recognize that each step along the lifetime of a young person impacts the next. That these different issues like early childhood development, like early literacy attainment, like high school graduation, like getting a good job, these are all interconnected. If we fail early, we will fail later. So you will see in our plan, which I believe you have draft copies of in front of you, that we came up with robust recommendations for all 6. And we also recognize, as Mr. Head so well stated, the amount of great accomplishments and existing efforts within Oakland in all of those 6 milestone areas. And so you'll see that part of our plan does not try and reinvent the wheel or insert government into a leadership role that it hasn't earned, but rather to lift up the work of our existing community organizations and see where government can support them and see where that power of collective impact can actually move the needle for our whole city. You'll see that at the end of the day, we have specific recommendations within each milestone area, but we came out with 3 overarching recommendations for how we will move forward in Oakland. And we recognize that Oakland is going to be a unique community, different from others, in that we have this incredible foundation of work upon which to build. But those 3 overarching recommendations begin with data. We so often talk about the numbers and statistics for a city, but we have to have the honesty and the discipline to disaggregate the data, to look at it in terms of race, in terms of gender, even in terms of zip code, in terms of economic status, if we really want to paint a picture and understand what is going on. And I'll give you one example in Oakland. Oakland has seen an incredible decrease in our unemployment rate. It's in a very short amount of time gone from more than 16% to about 5.6%. Great statistic, right? Except not true for the African American population. African Americans in Oakland have more than 2.5 times the unemployment rate of the overall city. And that's even a city that has a large representation of African Americans in it. And the numbers for them have not gotten better. They have actually gotten worse during the same period of time when the city overall has gotten better. If you don't pull out that data, you are not understanding the unemployment problem. The second area of overarching work that we've identified is the issue of impactful collaboration. Again, this idea of collective impact. Oakland is so proud of these incredible efforts, the passion, the intelligence, the talent of people that have been working on this issue long before the president lifted it up and brought it to national eminence. And yet, even with all that passion and great work, the overall statistics for the city of Oakland are shameful. They are shameful. We all know when we talk about not just good jobs, but economic security, that the highest correlation for economic security is educational attainment. And yet in Oakland, California, 85% of our white residents have a college degree, a BA or higher. Only 22% of African Americans, 17% of Latinos. How are we going to achieve equitable economic security for all of our residents with that type of disparity? And so clearly, collective impact is needed in a city like Oakland, where there are so many efforts, but they seem not to be leveraging one another in a way that makes that type of impact. And then finally, our third overarching recommendation is systems change. And that is when particularly we as government take a hard look at ourselves, have some uncomfortable conversations, and recognize that we all have come to government to make positive change and do the right thing, but sometimes our systems, our public systems, are having the unintentional consequence of holding people back. A example that I'll give you is specific to policing, and this is a statistic that you, Assemblymember Garcia, might find very interesting. Oakland has been having very deep conversations around racial profiling by its police department. We have put out the data, we've been collecting the data, and it's ugly. It is not at all pretty. But it has led to some important conversations about why is there such an overrepresentation of particularly boys and men of color that are stopped. And one thing we looked at was something called consensual stops and consensual searches. And that is a search that is absolutely legal, but it's if I, as a police officer, ask you if you are willing to be searched, if you say yes, I can search you. I don't have to have reasonable cause. You just have to say yes. But I am using my discretion as an officer to engage in that search. Legal, but it creates a sense of oppression in communities, particularly when we looked at the numbers and we saw at what disproportionate rates those types of consensual searches were being done on boys and men of color. 5 years ago, on average, the city of Oakland was doing 3,500 of these consensual searches a year. Since we have sat down and changed our policies, engaged in training, procedural justice training, implicit bias training, today we have fewer than 500 consensual searches a year in Oakland. And that change has happened at the same time that our violence has plummeted in this city. I am very pleased to report that gun violence in Oakland over the last few years has gone down 38%. That's as of 2015. And this year, our first quarter of 2016, looks like a similar amount of a percentage decrease this decrease that we accomplished over the last 4 years, we're probably going to see it potentially double this year. Again, I don't want to, it's still early in the year, but what we are doing is working. We are seeing more cooperation from communities of color. We are seeing more compliance and legal behavior, and it is because we have changed our approach, and law enforcement is working much more collaboratively with our service providers, with our street outreach workers. It is a very, very different system of law enforcement in the city of Oakland. And while I am proud of the changes that we have made, I also acknowledge we have much, much more work to do. So those are some examples of why those are the 3 areas that we are focusing on: data, collaboration, and systems change. And then I'll finish by lifting up a new initiative that I am very proud of called the Oakland Promise. Many cities have promise programs, and obviously in Oakland it's very needed. It's another good example of the LifeWorks framework. Most cities do a promise program where they're just offering college scholarships. We're actually starting at birth. We are recognizing that babies born into poverty, that their families need support, and they need an expectation and resource right away to put that college-bound mindset into the family. So we are actually going to be giving $500 college savings accounts to newborn babies who are born into poverty in Oakland, plus financial and other supports to their parents to support early childhood development. Again, the Oakland Promise also intervenes in kindergarten with college savings accounts universally, in middle school and high school with future centers to connect kids to internships and connect classroom with career, as well as then that college scholarship support, financial support, but also social emotional support through one-on-one mentors and peer support groups at colleges. So again, recognizing that we have got to go from cradle to career, that there are many steps along the way where we potentially lose all of our children, but particularly our men and boys of color. In Oakland, my 9th grade class, only 67% of them will graduate from high school. Only 46% of them will go or start a college. And only 10% of them will have a college degree 5 years after high school. That is unacceptable. It is shameful. And I am so grateful to you for lifting up this issue and also for championing the strong California budget proposal. And I pledge to you as the mayor of Oakland, I will do everything I can to advocate for that budget proposal, because you are not just making a wise investment, because we know when you make positive investments up front, you will save the taxpayers so much money on the back end. I mean, this is just dollars and cents of very smart financial investment. But so much more important than that, you are investing in human potential. We know that we are not benefiting from the full brilliance, talent, innovation, and skills of all of our population. And so I thank you for your leadership on this issue, and I'm excited to answer any questions.
Thank you to both of you, Mayor Schaaf and Mr. Head. I just want to uplift and thank you for the work that you do in Oakland. I'm a strong supporter of everything that you've talked about, whether it be Oakland Promise, our work in partnership with our superintendent around universal preschool for all Oakland young children. When I got into the assembly, gun violence was at one of the highest levels in 6 years, and it has plummeted because of some of the tremendous work that you've been doing. You're one of the few police departments that has procedural justice training, and Pastor McBride has been not just a city and regional leader, but a statewide leader on that issue, and he now does it statewide training program. And I have a bill this year with my fellow chair of this select committee, Reggie Jones Sawyer, to bring that statewide as a required training regimen. So there's so many things that you're doing that are uplifting our boys and men of color. I just want to thank you for that and appreciate the presentation. I want to give my colleague who also represents Oakland an opportunity to ask a question or make a comment as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for your presentation. As I listen, I'm struck by just how blessed we are to have incredible partnerships with our cities, and of course, Oakland being one of them. But it's not lost on me that when the committee hears from Councilmember Tubbs and Sammy Nunez, they, on behalf of Stockton, that they've been regular participants in this committee. And that when we hear from Sacramento, we welcome the participation of Vice Mayor Rick Jennings, and that our friends at the Sierra Health Foundation have been a statewide partner in this work, as well as in addressing the issues of crossover youth, young people who get pushed between the criminal justice system and the foster youth system. So we're blessed to have such great leadership, and I want to thank you, Madam Mayor, for your leadership. You highlighted places where there's been incredible improvement around unemployment and other opportunity. I think you also pointed out that there's work for us still to do. And I wanted to pick up there, borrowing from your discussion about employment and, the high school graduation rates. It struck me, could Oakland become one of the hubs for creating training, a pathway to get people into jobs in technology, specifically coding? And the reason I ask that is because I keep hearing people say that California will lose out on millions of coding jobs that could pay extremely well to individuals at any level of education, at high school, at college, at some community college, but the state overall doesn't have the training infrastructure to get our future coders there. And it often strikes me, could Oakland, could Richmond, could Stockton, could Sacramento, and other places in the state, could they become centers for coding? What would it take to help make Oakland a pathway for coding jobs for those who aren't having the opportunity that you described?
Well, in Oakland, we like talking about tequity.
I've heard you mention that.
And we were very honored that the White House chose Oakland, in fact, my alma mater, Skyline High School in Oakland, to announce the Computer Science for All initiative. And so people are looking at Oakland as a great place to train the next generation of technologists and innovators, and to address the issue of the shameful lack of diversity in the tech sector. I mean, let's just call that out. And I really am also honored to be in partnership with Reverend Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Push Coalition, and the great work that he's been doing. And again, we have to look at every step of the way. We have to ensure that our kids get exposed to coding early in school. And again, we have some great organizations, code.org, Yes We Code, are both very engaged in Oakland. Our school district has just switched over to a linked learning initiative where we really are creating these kind of schools within a schools and career pathways within the curriculum. And we have more and more companies coming to Oakland that do have a tech focus, although these days really almost every company really is a tech company. There is no company that's going to be successful that doesn't utilize technology. Even as we talk to the building trades, the level of math and science and computer skills and savvy that you have to be successful in any career right now is going up. And so those are the types of conversations that are happening. But we have to kind of, I think, intercede in every point along that life work pathway to ensure that we are really getting our kids the skills that they need to take advantage of this incredible economy that is all around us, and perhaps a little more quickly than I had anticipated, coming right into our city.